My name is Rebecca, and I lived and worked in some form of student housing cooperatives for about 8+ years and still do some consultation work. And it's a part of the Intercooperative Council, which is a system of about 21 properties now. The initial reason that drew me to the co-ops was the economics. It was really a huge load off to live in a system that, you could get a lot of amenities for very little price. The basic amenities were local telephone, internet, all of your utilities like heat and electricity and water, rent, food. We had meals that were served twice a day. It started as just kind of an agreement that, you understand that you have to pay shares, and kind of explaining that shares are different than a deposit. It means that you own a portion of the house and you own a portion of the system, which is very empowering if you spend the time thinking about it and really understanding that concept. Defining characteristics of a co-op: it's community, you're sharing resources, you're contributing financially to the well-being of the house, and you're adding your talents and your personality to it, as well as you're working together, you have a say in what's happening. I did that. I learned how to drywall and replace the ceiling and build stairs. And at the first meeting, you elected officers like a treasurer and a house manager who ordered food. The treasurer was essential, and they would come up with a budget, and the house would approve it. Republicans, you had Democrats, you had radicals, you had artists, you had musicians, you had, physicists, and you had just like this random group of people who you would never have crossed paths with normally in your core studies or your social scene outside of the co-op. And so it was really amazing that, I still get emails from random people who I would never, just like this huge web. We also had relationships with a lot of the farmers market folk and shares in a lot of the co-op farmers markets, and would contribute labor. Most people had bikes. We had about 4 bike racks and the bike shed, which was this huge garage that was just filled, and we had guff bikes. And guff is a term that we use in our co-op. I think originally it stood for like general use food, and I don't know what the other F is. Student housing system, the average shelf life is usually about 2 years. The age range mostly was about, I'd say 20 to 25 would be the majority of folks. And then there were quite a few folks who were in their 50s, 60s, 70s, who had been there for decades. The people in the co-ops pretty much mirrored the community. We lived in Ann Arbor, which is a pretty diverse campus life, but I'd say the co-ops in particular are probably more white than not. It was mostly middle class, I would say, overall. There are definitely things that can go so right, like a well-oiled machine, but the fact that you have a huge house full of people, so if somebody doesn't do their work, somebody else has to do it for them. And so it kind of falls on everybody else's shoulders. So after a while, that can become very tedious and terrible. At my house, the minimum requirement was 4 hours a week. And there are different jobs that ranged from cleaning a bathroom to doing a dinner clean to cooking dinner to taking out the garbage. I think in terms of the larger intentional communities, most of them are community oriented, so they tend to be a little farther out and on these huge plots of land that people will buy in a trust and then build little houses on them, and then there'll be a huge common house and a huge garden and things like that. But when I was in the student housing co-ops, working with the education committee, we spent a really long time having co-op field trips and going to different places so that people could have a real understanding of the greater co-op movement. The only thing I could say about living in a co-op is it was definitely the greatest experience I've ever had. I'll carry it with me forever.